really is the process that families can be guided through to their own recovery process. We utilize the phrase all the time. It's used all the time. Addiction is a family disease. But we don't do anything about it. All we do is acknowledge that family members are impacted without giving them solutions. We give them pity or we give them blame, but we don't give them tools. So, whether or not somebody intended to end up here, they're here. And why would we not offer them some better solutions than just winging it?
Welcome to the 1000 Days Sober podcast. I'm your host, Davy. I'm not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I am someone who lives a self-led life, alcohol-free as fuck, and I spend every waking moment of that life helping other people do the same, like right now. Today's conversation is one that everybody needs to hear. Whether you're a partner, whether you're a parent, whether you're a son or a daughter, you need to hear this, right? I'm going to be speaking to Lisa Katona Smith. Lisa is the founder of Parallel Recovery and the author of a great book. It's called Parallel Recovery, a guide for those who love someone struggling with substance use disorder. So yeah, it's not about you per se. It's about helping somebody else who is really struggling with substance use. Okay. So Lisa brings something rare to the conversation around alcohol and substance use. It's clarity without blame, compassion without collapse, and a framework that finally gives families permission to stop fixing and start healing, because we all like to fix, right? In this conversation today, we talk about what happens when loving someone becomes tiring and exhausting, why waiting for them to change keeps everybody in the family stuck, and how real influence doesn't come from control, but learning how to love each other better, okay? What we're going to talk about in this episode, we're going to explain what parallel recovery actually is, and why families need their own recovery process instead of living in constant reaction. We're going to talk about the vital point of shifting from fixing the person who is using the substances to working on yourself. Why that is so important, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about how reactivity and control and doing more are often fear-driven responses, okay? And we're going to be using internal family systems as a framework to try to explain why that happens. And finally, what does love better actually mean? We're going to talk about that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to shut the hell up and leave you in the capable hands of the beautiful, the amazing, the super intelligent, and someone who's doing the right work in the right space, Lisa Katona Smith. What part of the world do you come from, Lisa?
I live in Colorado in the United States.
Ah, Colorado. I've been there once.
Just once?
I think I drove through there maybe. Where's Breckenridge?
It's in Colorado.
It's in Colorado. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been to Colorado then. I drove from LA to Breckenridge. Well, I didn't drive. Actually, I was just stuck in the back somewhere in the car, but we had a family trip there and went skiing, you know?
You went skiing. Okay. How long ago was that?
Wow. It was the first family trip when I met my wife. So maybe like 15, 16 years ago.
Okay.
I've only ever been skiing twice in my life. That was the second
Oh, really?
time. Yeah. It's not really a British thing.
Okay. That's too bad.
I know, we don't get a lot of slopes. Parallel, I have a problem saying that. Parallel recovery. What is parallel recovery, Lisa?
Yeah. So parallel recovery really is the process that families can be guided through to their own recovery process. We utilize the phrase all the time. It's used all the time. Addiction is a family disease, but we don't do anything about it. All we do is acknowledge that family members are impacted without giving them solutions. We give them pity or we give them blame, but we don't give them tools. So, whether or not somebody intended to end up here, they're here. And why would we not offer them some better solutions than just winging it?
I mean, as somebody who's in the space helping people to become alcohol free, there's so many different ways you can help. Why did you choose to help the family members. It's really interesting and really vital
Yeah.
aspect of the journey.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, because I myself am a family member affected by substance use and mental health. And over the course of figuring out how to navigate this, there was a lot of opinions, but there wasn't actual support. There wasn't actionable tools, and family members are desperate and prime for like something that they can grab onto that feels better than the desperation or control that they tend to grab onto. So if you give them tools, they usually like to utilize them. There's a Desmond Tutu quotation that talks about, we need to stop pulling people out of the river and we need to go up the river to figure out why they're falling in. And I kind of attach onto that quotation and say that, we have willing family members, usually before the person who needs substance use support wants it. But we have got willing family members. Why would we not go up the river and help those people to become a part of the entry level treatment team? It's possible. They just don't know how to do it. So again, going back to my own story is there was a giant hole and I had to figure out how to help my son better and help my family better. And once I started to figure out a more sustainable way to do this, I was like, why is this not being offered to more people? We're just offering, again, either feeling sorry for them, which is fine for a minute. But it's not helpful to remain in a victim mindset. Or a finger point of like, the reason they keep doing this is because you're enabling it. And, I don't think either of those things are helpful.
Is it difficult to find people who want help? Because like
Hmm.
there's so many people who become, well, I use the term alcohol reliant, and they still don't want to get help.
Yeah.
For a variety of different reasons. Do you find the same problems inherent in the family structure?
I do. I do. And it's sort of the $1 million question, right? Like, how do you get people to say yes to getting help? So I use sort of two foundational, um, buckets, maybe, sustainability for family members and connection to your loved one. And in the talking points of trying to engage families to start doing something different, I talk about those two things, that your sustainability in this is a forever thing. You love this person. And I have yet to hear a family member that says, I'm done, actually be done. I always go, are you done today? Or are you done like in 6 months? Are you done in 5 years? Like, how long are you done? Because I'm going to guess, especially if you're a parent, that you're not done forever. You just need a break. And so sustainability, how do I get sustainability in this really challenging dynamic of a relationship? One. And two, what we know is connection invites people to get help. And how can you, the most important connection that they have, the family, do this differently? How can you love them better so that you might be able to invite them into joining you? And that is a little bit easier sort of space to enter with the family. But I will tell you, Lee, like 9 out of 10 times when people come to me, it's because they want to fix their person. And I say, well, let's start with you. And that
Yeah.
isn't always, the welcome thing, but they need help. They do need help. And I know, because I've done this, you also need help.
Yeah. In your book, you wrote of your son's addiction. Finally, I came to the realization that the changes I could control started with me.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that, 'cause I think it's really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're dealing with your child, adult or not, um, parents fall back into that like parent child relationship of, well, I'll just control things. I'll just pave the path and they can follow it. And the truth is, once someone gets above like 6 years old, that you can't, it doesn't work. If anyone's been a parent for a minute, you realize that you can't control your child. They're going to wear the shoes they want to wear. And regardless of how many times you put the other shoes in front of them. So what I could control was my reactivity and changing it to be responsive. What I could control was turning off my phone so that I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night and tracking him. I might still wake up in the middle of the night and have worry and fear, but tracking and then obsessive texting, which was the opposite of connecting to my son. It was actually disconnecting from my son or disconnecting him from me. I could control that. What could I do instead? I could control making sure that my daily habits were supporting the challenges that I was experiencing, that I could fuel my body with healthy foods, that I could rest when I needed rest, that I could reach out to my support system for support, as opposed to isolating and pretending like this wasn't a problem, or hiding because I was embarrassed. So what could I control? How could I engage differently with my son? How could I show up differently? And how could I take care of myself so that I could keep doing this and not break?
Yeah, I think when I read that, it like it extends way beyond alcohol or substance use for
Yeah.
me. It's every person who comes to me as a coach, for example. Like I get a lot of people coming to me, not only want to be alcohol free, they just have problems in their relationship or whatever. It's usually a relationship problem or with themselves. Everybody always comes trying to change the other person. Like the first, well, I had this fight yesterday, and if she did this and she did that, and then as soon as I say, okay, where's the mirror here? What is this saying about you? Let's focus on how you felt, what you said. So, and it's like it's turning it inwards. And this is what I was thinking about when I was reading it. It's like how powerful it is to just keep reflecting back on you, not the other person. Like how is my behavior impacting the other person? How's my nervous system in general impacting the other person? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super
So
cool.
the beginning and the end of my book, at the beginning, I talk about values and, kind of asking the question, who have I become in this disease? And who do I want to be in the relationship? So if you've become a reactive person or an isolated person, is that who you want to show up as? Is that your value system? Is that the legacy that you want to leave the people around you? Not just the person that you're worried about, but all of the people around you. You have more than one person. And then how do I continue to show up in my own value system? So that's a very reflective process, right? And then at the end of the book, I talk about something that I call a U-turn, which it goes for both people, but for family members, it's, it made sense that I started to show up reactively again, because that's what I get pulled into when I hear these things or when I see these things or when I'm in a fear mindset. So how can I be more responsive? How can I control that? How can I make a U-turn and go back to that relationship and say, hey, you know what? Yesterday's conversation didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And so here's the responsibility that I'm going to take for changing it. And you invite somebody to take responsibility for their part in what didn't go well, but you've got to take responsibility for your part. When I hung up the phone, I probably should have just asked for space. I wasn't ready to talk about this hard thing, or I wasn't ready to hear what you had to tell me, and I'm more ready today. That's what you can control. It doesn't change what they did or what they're doing, but it really goes a lot further into inviting them to be reflective and possibly showing up differently.
I use internal family systems
Yeah.
framework in my work. And when I was reading
Yeah.
your book, I noticed that you refer to it. And what you're talking about there, and maybe you can expand on it to the audience, is you're recognizing that a part of you, what I call below the line in victim consciousness, probably had the conversation, and you're then repairing that rupture, and then you're going to get above the line into self energy and then have that conversation or have the repair in that conversation. Talk about how IFS has impacted your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Really being able to understand family of origin and your own upbringing and, what are the parts of you that are stepping forward in protective moments, in fearful moments, in controlling moments. And I think it's a combination of, you know, is there is there a child part of me that grew up in an alcoholic family that learned really carefully that if I keep things calm or if I remove myself from the situation, explosions don't happen? Is that part of you showing up in this? And is that the part of you that's actually the most effective? That was a survival person when you were 6 or 7 or 14, that showed up in that relationship. Does that person have to show up today? You have a different skill set today, or you're able to learn a different skill set today because you're now an independent adult and you don't need to be that person in order to survive in your family. So how can you show up differently? But just really recognizing that, the part of me that was reactive was protecting a part of me that no longer needs protection. I now can handle the fear or the challenge or the difficult conversation in a much more effective way than I could back then.
Yeah, what you just explained there, I think like is really powerful because when you grow and you learn to, I use the metaphor of a wrestling ring, like a tag team. So
Yeah.
my wrestling ring, I always want Self in there. And Self is like Gandhi in a way, like he's going to go in the ring, he's never going to fight. But every now and then, this cheeky little part like tags itself in and jumps in a ring, and then it wants to fight, it wants to go to war. And what you're saying there, I think, is really important because it allows us to access compassion, right? We can find the
Yeah.
compassion within ourselves to realize that we are parts are activated, but we can also see the person who is suffering from substance abuse in our family and go, well, if I'm parts activated and this framework works for me, why doesn't it work for them? It must work for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I call it like getting out of your box, recognizing what is your need in this moment? And the answer to that question 100% of the time is I need them to stop this. And then, when kind of let's go deeper than that. Yes, that would help. That absolutely would help. But what is not being seen or heard or validated or provided compassion for? Like, what is it that you're looking for? Are you needing to be heard? Are you needing for your experience to be seen too? How can you ask for that from the appropriate place? Because the person that you're that's struggling, honestly, is probably not the appropriate place to get that from. They've got enough that they're dealing with right now. They don't have the capacity to give you compassion to. They're not even giving it to themselves at this point. So if you demonstrate compassion for yourself, that you can say, you know what, when that happened yesterday, I'm not proud of it. And it also made sense because I was really scared to talk about this thing that we're talking about. And I recognized that what I needed to do was get a little bit of help around that. I've done that. I'm coming back so that I can talk about this hard topic. And I'd like to get another go at it. I mean, that's like putting a lot of things in place. Who do I want to be in this relationship? A U-turn of like, whoa, didn't do what I wanted to do, what I've been practicing doing. I'm going to try it again. And self-compassion, which is modeling to your person that it made sense that I hung up the phone yesterday or that I was reactive or that I slammed the door, because that was really scary for me to hear. And it's hard to feel like we're back where we were, where we've worked so hard to get out of. That's modeling to them what they also need to do, which is, hey, look, so what happened last weekend? You didn't go into the weekend hoping that that would happen. So what could you do to understand what led up to that slip or those bad decisions and give yourself compassion around the need that you had outside of the slip? And I mean, we can be talking about substance use or a million other maladaptive coping skills.
Yeah, I want to talk about shame a little bit actually, because talking about parts, it got me thinking about times when I felt shame. So when people who I love are struggling and I feel responsible, maybe as a parent or as a husband, a young juvenile part that feels shame will suddenly step into the ring and it will shame them in order to keep me safe.
Yeah.
So one example that comes to mind for me, I used to, there was someone in my life who was very important to me and they used to self-harm. And they told me that when they self-harmed, so they used to cut, and when they self-harmed and cut, their family would react with shame. What are you doing this? Are you stupid? What's the matter with you? You're going to kill yourself. Like a lot of shame. And it wasn't until learning about, I bought a book called Cutting. I can't remember the author, I think Steve Levenkranz or something. And I learned more about the whole phenomenon, what was going on. And suddenly this guy was saying, when it happens, you need to be calm. You need to help clean up. And I'm thinking, this is the complete opposite to everybody freaking out, blaming, shaming. And they're only doing it from a protective standpoint. And here's this guy going, no, you get down on the level, understand that this is a part of them that really needs this to release something and be aware of that so you can show up in the right space. But everybody was just using shame tactics.
Yeah.
So talk about shame a little bit.
What you just said is made me think about shame usually comes from a place of there's a level of fear, of like, I don't understand this, or I don't understand how to talk about it, or I don't understand how to, present this to the world or to the rest of my family or to professionals. So it's embarrassing for me. It's about you. Shame is about you. And when you kind of pile on shame to another person, you're not able to understand their experience and then help guide them to a different solution. You've got to get below the act. Underneath the act is a problem, and understanding that problem requires compassion, not shame. But you've got to check your own fear. I mean, that's a really scary, and for most people, it's hard to understand something that is hurting you being helpful. So, really trying to ask curious questions that aren't about a solution. Like, what does this solve for you? What a gift to give somebody, because that person, by the way, they don't cut in public. They know that it's a maladaptive coping skill. They know that there's better options, but they don't have an option that works better.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe in that moment as well, I'm just saying maybe because I don't know, an aspect of it is, look, I'm really struggling.
Yeah.
And then the people come in and they don't see what they want them to see, because of their own shit. And then this, it links into a quote in your book: the moment your person seeks help is often the moment when your recovery is needed most. So if we apply that to the cut-in, the moment your person seeks help, I just cut my arm, is the moment your recovery is needed most. So when your shame is coming up and you really want to help this other person, deal with your shame.
Yeah.
Go see a therapist and deal with your shame. And that is how you can help the person. It's so counterintuitive, though, I imagine, for if 95% of the time we're all walking around like unconscious robots, and I imagine it's very counterintuitive. You must have a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it is challenging. And you know what? I'm going to challenge right there, though, that because I've heard that a lot recently, especially like this is counterintuitive. I don't actually think it's counterintuitive. I think that we have unlearned how to slow down and be present with people's human experience. I think that as a human, just as human beings, we have unlearned that pace that it requires us to be with somebody in their struggle. So I don't think it's counterintuitive. I just think it's deeper than we're comfortable with and deeper than we practice regularly. I think human beings, we're extremes. We're either all good or all bad. And like, we really just don't exist in either one of those much of the time. We exist in this other gray area, and learning how to kind of, what's underneath what's being said, what's one layer deeper, There's an organization called the Arbinger Institute. They have a book called The Anatomy of Peace. It's a great book. And it kind of accidentally started getting used in like wilderness treatment years and years ago. But it wasn't written for that. But the storyline of the book is actually families who go to a family program after dropping their people off at wilderness treatment, like adolescents. And, but it wasn't written for that. It's actually a leadership organization. And they have something called, the pyramid of influence. And the pyramid of influence is very much like the food pyramid, where there's, a whole lot of rungs on the triangle that get bigger as you go down, that are helping things go right. And then one thing at the top is called correct, and that's dealing with things that are going wrong. And if we can stay in that bottom part of the pyramid most of the time, unless there's an actual emergency, we're going to be working on this relationship. But when I show families this pyramid, I say, what's one layer lower? So for example, there's a layer called listen and learn. And in order to listen and learn, you actually have to ask a question. And you can't just tell somebody something. So like, okay, so you want to learn about this experience. What is a question that you can ask that's not a solution, like a rhetorical question? That's an actual question. Help me understand what you would want me to know about what just happened to you. What would you want me to know that I don't know? Because I don't understand this. That's like an amazing, but you've got to slow yourself down and you've got to slow them down. And honestly, what that requires is taking yourselves in this situation out of a very fast moving world. It's pausing.
Yeah. Wow. On the counterintuitive thing, I'm good you brought that up. I think for me, it seems counterintuitive to my parts.
Yeah.
But when I'm in self energy, everything is gravy. So what I've learned myself and what I teach my clients, if we just pick on, I want to stop drinking alcohol, for example. So I don't necessarily help people quit alcohol. I help people grow what I call a greater line awareness of whether they're in parts or whether they're in self, and to find ways of getting into self more often and more consistent. So if they do that, then it doesn't seem counterintuitive to them. All of a sudden they don't need alcohol because that part of them, self, doesn't need it, right?
Yeah.
Which is very, very similar to what you were saying there, This thing about slowing down, which again, I recognize as self energy. I use the hare and tortoise metaphor in my work. I'm very much the hare. And then more because of the work I've done more and more, I'm like, oh, I'm in that hare energy. Slow down. And when I slow down, I get into that self energy. And it always reminds me, and you wrote about this in your book, stimulus and response with Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Really important. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it really is about reactivity versus responsiveness. And the tortoise and the hare example, I will say, go slow to go fast. Like people come to me and they're like, well, how do I get them in the treatment? And I get them not talking about the problem and actually connecting to the person. And they're like, well, this is going to take forever. And I'm like, okay, so again, unless we're in they're in a absolute life or death situation right now, that's a different story. If somebody's in crisis, we got to deal with crisis. We got to be reactive. But if most of the time, we're not actually in crisis. We're in perceived crisis. So going slower means making sure that all of the steps are laid foundationally so that you can connect relationally and you can be responsive as opposed to reactive. So when someone calls you and something happened again, right? Like here we are again. I lost a job again. I'm getting kicked out of my apartment again. You can say, shoot, that's a really tricky situation. How can I help support you? That's a response as opposed to, well, I guess I'm going to have to bail you out again. That's reactiveness. That's the hare. That's going immediately to the solution instead of, okay, so let me sit with you in this problem and support you while you fix it. Or recognize that there is a problem and that something bigger needs to change. I think you were talking about, are you in your parts or are you in yourself? And what came to my head when you were saying that is, and maybe this is partly a question, Lee, do you find that some people just don't even know who their self is?
Oh, 100%. If alcohol feels louder than you would like it to be, you don't have to figure it out alone. If you're questioning your relationship with drinking or quietly exhausted by it, reach out to me, Lee Davy, at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. No labels, no pressure, just an honest conversation. Now back to Lisa Katona Smith. When I stopped drinking, now 17 years ago, something like that, I was 35. It was a really difficult moment for me because the way I stopped drinking was to change my alcohol paradigm. So you got to think from 14 to 35, this substance that I was spending all my money on was the single most golden, incredible thing in the world. Like, I'm not saying that I drank it because it soothed my pain, but the way that I call it the liquid lie, that we're all actually indoctrinated from birth to drink alcohol. You cannot avoid it. The system is set up for you to become alcohol reliant, and the ones who escape it are very, very lucky. Because of that, every night when I finished work, I couldn't wait to drink. Every weekend, I couldn't wait to drink. Everything was like geared up, my whole life around it. So when I learned that actually all this value that I thought alcohol gave me, like it gave me confidence, it improved my social experiences, it connected me to people. When I realized that it was wrong, that the opposite was true, blew my mind a little bit. And I was able to stop drinking really easily. And then this deeper existential question came up of, well, what else don't I know about life? So that then led me to like, who the heck am I? Like, I had a lot of shame. Like, how could I get to 35 years of age and ruin this, because this thing was ruining my life, ruin my relationships, yet it's all for nothing. So for me, I didn't know who I was for many years. So I stopped drinking at 35. I would say I'm 50 now. I would say in my 40s, when I did my master life coaching training with the Elements and Coaching Institute, that is when I was really challenged. And what really helped me, Lisa, was the coaches kept saying to me, you're in your head, you're in your head, you're in your head. And I didn't understand what they were on about. And I get really angry with them. What do you mean I'm in my head? What do you mean I'm in my head? And I learned, just for me, that whenever I was in my head, I was a part. But whenever I was in my body, which these people were teaching me to do, which I'd never done before, when I could get out of my head into my body, that's when suddenly I found self. And so the more I got into my body, the more I grew relationship with self, the more I could start to distinguish between when I'm part activated and when I'm self. And the biggest common denominator for me is speed, is pace. Mm-hmm. My wife used to say to me, you talk too fast, you eat too fast, you walk too fast, you have sex too fast, you do everything too fast. And I used to defend and judge and resent her for that. And now I realize she was 100% spot on. So whenever I'm moving a little bit too fast, thinking too fast, or literally moving, oh my God, a part in the ring. Mm-hmm. So yeah, 100%. One of the most difficult things to do is to help people recognize the difference between all these different parts that are trying to keep them safe and self. Yeah, so 100%.
Yeah. And so I'm going to spin that to families in a second. But what I want to say about that is it really requires you to go against the paradigm of celebrations are around alcohol. Toasts are around alcohol. Relaxation is around alcohol. It asks you to challenge a very popular message. So for families, I would say that they don't know themselves because of their family of origin or their cultural upbringing or traditions and expectations from past generations. Parents will say, they just need to stop doing this, or they need to fall in line, or, this is how I did it. And, I always honored my family, and, that might be a paradigm that needs to be put down. Like, just because that worked for you, first of all, I would argue that it probably didn't work 100% for you, but, it worked in some level to get you to a place where you are today. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. I do some work with genograms, which is really a family tree that essentially looks at patterns as opposed to just relationships. And it really looks at patterns of codependency, patterns of substance use, patterns of chronic illness or mental health or substance use, patterns of loss, premature loss or displacement of families, and being able to bless the lessons that we received from past generations, and then flip that to be a lesson for future generations. So, for example, particularly women who tend to bear the weight of the term codependent more than others. A lot of times we can look at family systems and see that 3 or 5 generations ago, there was a breadwinner who was an alcoholic, and his spouse couldn't leave him. She couldn't support herself and her 5 children without him. So she had to learn how to get him out of bed and get him to work and make sure that he was set to keep that job so that that family could keep their head above water, because she didn't have another choice. So that pattern of codependency can be blessed, but it doesn't need to continue. We don't need that anymore. We now can support ourselves. Women are allowed to have bank accounts now and buy houses and all kinds of stuff. So they don't need the support of an alcoholic spouse to keep themselves and their children out of trouble. So families can start to learn self separately while still honoring what was passed down from past generations, which is, I think, similar to the societal message of drinking around celebrations or drinking around grief or drinking around happiness or drinking around everything. I do like bike races and running races, and I'm always just flabbergasted that at the finish line of these things, they hand you a beer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the worst thing that you could possibly put in your body at that moment. Yet that's what's handed, because that's what's sponsored. And that's what's told societally, that we celebrate this. We do a hard thing and we celebrate this way, which is really counterintuitive. When you talk about the head and the body and the parts, like parts being in your head and self being in your body, as a runner or a cyclist, the head will quit way before the body needs to, right? The head will say, this is too hard, way before your muscles and your heart actually need to give up. And that's a great, I think, visual to that parts versus self is overcoming the parts, overcoming the mind, saying, I'm tired, this is too hard. And the self saying, no, we've trained for this.
Yeah, we've got this.
We've got this.
We got this. Oh, wow. So much I want to talk to you about that. Made some notes so I don't forget it. The genogram, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Genogram? Okay.
Genogram.
I had a conversation a couple of nights ago with a friend, and I'd like to share it with you. You tell me if I'm on the same lines with the genogram. He's German. And he was telling me that he was having a conversation with his friend's wife, who's Japanese. And while they were having this conversation, my German friend realized that there's a part of him that thinks that he's evil because of his lineage going back to World War II and the treatment of the Jews, etc., etc. And then his friend was like, well, that's really crazy because I also think that I'm evil. And so he was saying to me that for him, that realization that he thinks there are parts of him that thinks he's evil. In that conversation with this Japanese lady, him and her were able to release this burden per se, just by talking about it and realizing, holy shit, I've been thinking of evil all this time and I'm not. And to realize that actually that wasn't his worldview. It's like a legacy burden in IFS, like it was passed down to him. And
Yeah.
I'm half Chinese. So he then posited to me, what is the half Chinese in you? Like, how is that showing up? And we had a little reflection on it. And for me, like, Chinese is like, when I grew up, the Chinese were ridiculed. We made fun of them. He said, in his mind, when he grew up, Chinese were dirty.
Mm.
I just had, we take the mickey out of their voice and the way they speak and we think they're stupid. I don't know where that came from, but that came down to me somewhere before I was even born. But then I learned that I'm half Chinese. Well, it's not going to take a genius to put it together to think that I'm going to think that there's a part of me that is just not, that is deemed ridiculous and stupid when it comes to society. And it's so interesting that my wife and my daughter are dumbfounded that I've never looked into my Chinese ancestry. So I'm 52% Chinese. My biological father was Chinese. I've never met him. And I think a part of it is shame.
Yeah.
And maybe to try to change that would release the shame, to maybe embrace it, to look into it a little bit more. Is that what you're talking about when it comes
Yes,
to
it
genealogy?
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, yeah, it would be fascinating to kind of work with you on that. Um, there's, I work with genograms a lot when I'm working with people who I'm going into an intervention with. And my approach to interventions is really to invite the person who needs like a higher level of care, to join us, the family system, on our change process, on our parallel recovery journey. And so the genogram comes in handy when we start looking at kind of creating a new family, like a motto almost, or a personal motto. And then the person, let's call the identified person, who we're trying to get maybe into a higher level of care, sees that everybody is taking responsibility for how these things that have come down river to us unknowingly, we didn't like go find it. It just happened. And how we're taking those messages and changing them for future generations. So for example, I'm going to simplify things. There might be a pattern of secrecy in a family, right? Like, if you generations ago had mental illness in your family, you kept that under wraps because again, you couldn't keep your job, or we didn't have really acceptable help for people with mental illness. And so you kept it a secret. And so then people started struggling. And instead of asking for help, they kept it a secret. And then it became abusive marriages or abuse towards children or fractured relationships, all of the things that happen when people aren't getting help for their pain points, started to occur in that family system. And all of that is passed downstream. So today, if we can look back and say, wow, there's been a lot of fracture and there's also been a lot of unhelped mental illness in this family, or unhelped pain. We can bless the coping skills that people had to develop out of survival and say, in the past, our family has kept secrets to keep each other safe. Moving forward, we can ask for help early and often, which
Yeah.
that just changes it. It just takes the shame out of it. It says they had to. We don't have to today. We have different resources and we have a different understanding with our whole family who is sitting here today hurting to do this different moving forward. And here's what we're going to do. Mom, I'm going to get help. I'm going to be at my weekly support group meeting every single Wednesday, not answering my phone, because that's what I need to get help for me. I'm going to go see my therapist and deal with some of my childhood trauma that's making me show up reactively in this relationship. And I'm going to learn how to sit with your hard experiences. That's that shift of here's what we learned. Thank you. We don't have to point fingers. A lot of, especially older people, do not want to look back at their parents and with upset or anger. And that's not what this is about. This is looking at it with understanding and curiosity and compassion, and then saying, I think we can do better now. We've got some better resources.
I think that's the power of your work is, you can create generational chain breakers, right? So I think what I observe in the world a lot, and I definitely got into this energy myself, is you grow up as a child and you're in the command and conquer hierarchy, right? Your parents have the power over you because you're a child. And then as you get older and they get older as well, but in some sort of culture, in the culture I grew up in, the older you get, the more childlike you become, in the perception is. And so as you grow older, you start to teach, you try to treat your parents like you've now got command and control over them. So you're treating them like a child, you're treating them like a victim, right? What I found in the work that is available to you after you stop relying on substances, if you choose to do that deeper work. So I stopped drinking and thought, I am the most conscious human being on this planet. And then, 10 years later, my wife's asking for a divorce because she doesn't want to be living with a boy anymore. And I couldn't understand it because I wasn't drinking. So it's very different. I stopped drinking, then I continue to be conscious. When you continue to be conscious, then you can now change things, right? Like, for example, a simple thing. So my dad, whenever I go into the house to see my dad, I hug him and I hold him and I hold him for an uncomfortable period of time, which used to be uncomfortable for him, but now it's not because now he's used to it. And it's just a little thing. I haven't sat down with him and had a deep, long conversation about past and stuff. I'm just going from shaking his hand, which happened all our life, to hugging him. Another little one, and then I'll throw it back over to you. I'm here in Los Angeles at the moment. My mother-in-law's got a bad back. She just had surgery. They're both in their 80s. And her husband's downstairs making her a smoothie. Now, this is a culture where the women look after the men don't look after women. And my wife's coming in, and I just sent her a message and said, hey, Liza, when you come in, be aware your dad is looking after your mum. So if you want to change anything, do it very gently. You know what I mean? It's like, because I can just see it coming in, going, what are you making it up for? What are you doing it? And he will feel shame and step aside. I think being self-aware allows you to see things that you never would have saw when you was in victim consciousness stuck in your parts.
Yeah. Yes, totally. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful example of someone at 80 who is aware that I might want to show up differently in this relationship. And for your wife to be able to witness that, however imperfect it is, right? Like she might know better what her mom would maybe like. And letting him learn and have that experience, that's neat. I like that example.
It's all for me, it's all about like, where did I first learn this? I think it was the conscious leadership group. I think they use this example of a line, and they said when you're above the line, you have access to like compassion and empathy and love, and when you're below the line, you're in victim consciousness. You're in this drama triangle, and then I linked that to IFS, and I realized that I'm treating everyone like a victim. If we go back to the cutting, for example, and the person who was cutting, you're treating her like a victim. I know better than you, so I'm a hero. I'm still in victim energy. I'm a hero. I know better than you. I'm going to tell you, no, that's not love. And in your book, you talk about love, like and how we think we are acting out of love, but we're just hurting the other person or pushing them further away. You talk about love, big one.
Yeah, totally. I call it loving better. Because we all have attachment to what we think love looks like. And when you're, particularly when you're talking about parents, we get into the love means doing for, taking over, controlling an outcome. That's what love means. And, or teaching and lecturing and, just like at some point, love means empowering somebody else to make the choices they're going to make and carry the consequences, positive and negative. One of the things that a word that I do not use, families really struggle with this word. Well, two words, there's two actually. One is proud. I do not use the word proud when I'm talking to my own children. Unless it's phrased like this. I'm really proud of the effort that you put into that. It's about them holding the result, positive or negative. If I don't want to carry their failures, I can't carry their successes either. So stop trying to do that with the word proud. So for, I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. For parents to step out of love is doing and into love is allowing, and love is sharing an experience with somebody or witnessing, being a compassionate witness to somebody else's experience, that feels kind of powerless to people who've had very transactional love, which a lot of parents just do because our kids can't survive without us when they're little. So we learn how to do things for them. And our parents did things for us. But is that actually empowering your person to do better for themselves? I mean, I would argue not.
Yeah, that so much comes up for you when you let's say go to work with yourself and you start to recognize that you need to change the way that you're showing up and helping. And it seems so foreign. It feels like you're not doing anything. It feels like you're letting them down because
Yeah.
you're part of like they're so used to being in charge. Oh, this is the way that we help, and so it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to raise with you and is see your opinion on this and whether you found this in work because I shouldn't imagine I'm alone. Is I grew up in the UK, so I don't use the word alcoholic in my work because I see it as a scapegoat and a part of what I call the liquid lie. So alcoholic looks like this, and if you're not this, then
Yeah.
you're okay. And because of that culture and because of what I call the liquid lie, when I opened up to my family and friends and said, I've got a problem with alcohol, it's destroying my marriage, I need to stop, I don't think anybody ever asked me about it. I
Mm.
don't, I don't, I don't think any family, if you're listening to this, family members and friends, if I'm wrong, let me know. I don't remember anybody saying to me, oh my God, you got a problem with alcohol. Let's have a conversation around that. What I, what my energetic feeling of the situation was people didn't want to talk about it because a lot of people were the same as me.
Mm.
So if, for example, you have a family and all the family are drinking just as much, if not more than you are, and you open up and say, actually, by my definition, the only thing you understand here is that I'm an alcoholic, right? So I'm going to use that because it's the only thing you understand. I think it's really difficult for them to show up and help you or be serious about you because they're like, well, he can't be right because I drink as much as him. So then the help doesn't come forward. Do you come across that in your work?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I would say, Lee, that it usually shows up with denial of the family members, not awareness that like, oh, well, how can I ask them to get help if I do the same thing as them? It's rarely that when I'm talking to families, it's very carefully asking them questions about their own relationship with alcohol. We just, here in the US finished Thanksgiving and, I, talks about Thanksgiving start happening in August for me. That's usually when the first person will bring up Thanksgiving. And should we not have alcohol over for Thanksgiving? Or, we can't possibly not have alcohol at Thanksgiving. And I always ask them like, what is your relationship that you're spending so much time thinking about this? I had a client one time that said they had a dream And in the dream, they were on vacation at a beach and they were like in a nice relaxing chair, and they couldn't see anything other than like the landscape, the ocean, and the warmth and all that kind of stuff. And on both sides of the chair were like alcoholic frozen beverages. And when they woke up from the dream, they were really upset with themselves that that was respite and peace, that there was alcohol in their respite and peace. And I mean, we really that was a remarkable dream and a remarkable way for them to wake up and kind of go, why did I think that vacation had to include that? But that's an example of, a family kind of getting aware that all of our celebrations revolve around alcohol. And how much priority are we putting on this over the gathering or the connection or the other, experiences that we're fostering in this environment, the other traditions, I guess, other than alcohol. I would say rarely do families come and say, we also drink too much. I mean, usually it's, I'm having to ask questions around what's going to come out when we start having a conversation with your son or daughter about your use, which is frequent, from alcohol to cocaine. I mean, lots of stuff. And, there is truth around people can get to a place of addiction with substance use, but they can also just have an unhealthy relationship with it. And I loved at the very beginning of this conversation how you said you had to change your paradigm around alcohol use. You had to reprioritize it in your life. So rather than calling someone an alcoholic, can we just say, this is what happens in your behavior, in our relationship when alcohol's around? And I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't want to be around it. Scares me. And I don't want to be around it. And then be open to a reciprocating conversation, which might be valid. You might not need to go to treatment, but you might have an unhealthy relationship with the priority that you have placed on substances.
Yeah, in the UK, they use alcohol use disorder is the term, and they have a question sheet, like answer these 20 questions, and if you answer so and so, you're an alcoholic or whatever. And I answered the questions, but I didn't just answer them for me. I answered them for my culture. Like, I only knew two people in my life. By the time I stopped drinking, two people in my life who didn't drink. One was called Nicola. She never drank her entire life. And the other one was my granddad who stopped drinking. Imagine how many people I come across in 35 years of my life, and only two had never drunk. So when I was answering the questions on alcohol use disorder, I was answering them from a cultural perspective. And I was like, holy shit. Like if we use the cliche iceberg metaphor, you and I are probably only seeing the tip of the iceberg, a very small proportion of people who are brave enough, courageous enough, or are spending enough time in self-energy to go, I think we need help here as a family. Yeah. And then beneath that is this huge, massive iceberg of people that don't even know there's a problem, that they're so, that the culture is so endemic of this is what we do. People like us do things like this, that when one of them has a problem, there's no way that the family is going to go to seek help because they don't think there's anything wrong. And so that to me is like why I'm so passionate about alcohol in particular is because I honestly think if it was introduced into government today as something that they wanted to legalize, there's no way they would legalize it. And it's so insidious, at least with smoking. Smoking gets on my nerves as well, but at least with smoking, the narrative is changing a little bit. But yeah, I just find it incredible. I think if you're listening to this, folks, like broaden this out a little bit, right? Honestly, it's like, for me, one of the biggest game changers in my life was having coaching. I have a coach today. I'll have a coach until the day I die, because you can always grow, you can always learn. And everything you're growing, everything you're learning has that ripple effect on your wife, on your children, on the person you meet on the plane. Like, you can make a change in the world by seeking help is not the right word. It's like, just go, because you need that growth and development,
Yeah.
and
Becoming it's just self-betterment. It's not even seeking
yeah,
help. I mean, it really is just saying, how can my impact be different in the world? Like, rather than just like, this is the taking mentality. I've arrived and I'm there. I've arrived. But the giving mentality is, I got this far. How much further can I get to pass down for future generations? And again, going back to that genogram, it's not about saying what we learned was wrong or bad. It's about saying what we learned is no longer serving us, or the people that we are, leaving this world to in our family system. It's not going to serve them anymore. The DSM-5 in 2018 changed the diagnostic criteria from just addiction or not addiction, or substance use disorder or not substance use disorder, to mild, moderate, severe. Why it took till 2018, have no idea. But even then, today you don't hear that. What you said, Lee, about, when you use the word alcoholic, you have a picture of what that is. The person has burned their life down. Why are we waiting that long for people to look at the way they're going about living? And could it be shifted just a little bit to be better, so that people downstream can have an even better experience than we have had? They don't have to learn this. We're going to teach it. Like, that's what's going to be passed down, as opposed to, having to unlearn. What can we get rid of that has to be unlearned?
yeah. It's like I was having a conversation with my son. My son's 24, my daughter's 9. My son's from a different relationship that I'm in today, and I would say that I never parented him really from 9 onwards, because we divorced and his mum looked after him, and I saw him less than his mum, right? And I was saying to him how Zia is Zia is raised differently than Jude was raised for me, because I'm in Zia's life 100%, and I'm not in Jude's life 100%. And when I was a lush, like I was drinking, but worse than that, I was super unconscious. So I wasn't able to do a quote unquote good enough job at the time than I can do today. But what we both settled on was, yeah, but none of that matters. What matters is now, right? What matters
Yeah.
is, like, as a father now, even though I'm 21, you don't lose that ability, because we're so malleable, to just help him. So then it becomes, how can I help him? Which is what we're talking about, which is
Yeah.
like, I need to continue to work on myself. I continue to show up with an overflowing cup, and then just be a really great role model for him, or be able to show up in the right way. I think your work is really, really important.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely, Lee. I mean, really being able to model that. Look at the change that you can make in yourself, and compassion. I mean, you touched on so many things about my work, like compassion for yourself, that I didn't have the tools that I have today to show up as a father for you then, and I'm showing up differently for you now. Also the gift of him seeing your evolution and modeling that, and then empowering him, as opposed to enabling him to stay, transient in his life.
Yeah. And it isn't easy. It isn't easy, but I think turning that, looking in that mirror, like every single time I'm triggered now, every single time I'm like, oh, hey, I'm triggered. What is going on for me? What is the work for me right now? Like, I think that's really important. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you. Everybody, Parallel Recovery. I'm sure you get it on Amazon, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, go Amazon, go look at it. Really important. And I would say, anybody who's got a family, go out and get it. I got a 9-year-old daughter, right? Like, she's not knocking down the
Yeah.
alcohol, and she lives in a family of people who don't drink. Doesn't mean you don't need to be aware of what is potentially going to come up down the road and be ready for it, right? So everybody go out and find a book. Where can people find you, Lisa?
Yep. My website is lisakatonasmith.com. I also have a TED Talk, The Power of Parallel Recovery. And I'm most active on Instagram, parallel_recovery.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. Until next
Thank you,
time.
Lee.